To kick everything off, just introduce yourself to the room and explain who you are for everyone that doesn't know you. I'd be surprised if anybody doesn't know you, though, to be fair.
So, Ian Rabbidge, I'm the co-founder of Alvio, which is a tech plugin that enables Shopify stores and WooCommerce stores to connect and share inventory and enables brands to build new distribution digitally for their products. And we do some really interesting work with brands and sports clubs and all sorts. Arrived from Australia 35 years ago as a very young guy.
You're not Australian, are you?
I am, yeah, exactly. It was like a lot of Australians, coming to the UK, coming to Europe, coming to London was always the target. I just stayed a lot longer than most.
So, going into some of your history, because I'm quite lucky because I know a little bit of your history. But for those who don't know, just take us through that journey of predominantly brand building in the early days with the likes of Red Bull and Snapple and stuff like that. Just take us through that.
Yeah, I think we've got 20 minutes, so 35 years condensed into 20 minutes, so I'll keep it really brief. Yeah, look, I didn't go to university. I did the equivalent of A-levels in Australia, but my thing was always about going out and earning money, and I just wasn't one for books. So I was selling swimming pools in Sydney before I left. And a mate of mine was, swimming pools in Sydney. It's a good place to sell swimming pools. It's a big market, but I went from selling big quantities of water to little tiny quantities of water. A friend of mine was here just before I was and found an opportunity to import a brand of mineral water from Canada, which was a startup company out of Canada. It was very, very different to anything on the market here. It was in the days when Coke was about 50 pence a can. Our product was £1 a bottle, £1.50 a bottle, depending upon the venue. And we literally borrowed some money, shipped a container over, and we had several thousand cases, probably not several thousand cases, but certainly multiple thousands of bottles of product in a warehouse in Notting Hill suddenly to sell. And I guess I didn't understand any of the sort of the theories of marketing or the theories of distribution of products. But when you've got £10,000 worth of product burning a hole in your back pocket, sitting in a warehouse, you've got a lot of pressure to go out there and sell. So I start with this because it's a theme I always come back to when I talk to brands. It's always about the distribution. It's about putting your product in jeopardy of being found and sold. And so we literally walked the streets with backpacks and cold samples of these products, and we knocked on every door. I'd arrived 3 days earlier. I had my A to Z of London. Now, to those of you in the digital world, the A to Z was something that we all had in the pre-digital world, which was a street atlas. And in my Australian thinking, the centre of the universe in the UK was Piccadilly Circus. That was the starting point. And we were living in Hammersmith at the time. So I literally caught a tube into Piccadilly Circus, cold samples in my backpack, A to Z in my hand, and I then started to go to the sandwich bars and the corner shops, and literally just walking in, presenting them with the product, giving them a taste, negotiating with them, getting some product on the shelf, and we started to build our distribution base in central London off the back of that.
Nice.
And we didn't have any money, so we sort of lent into the heritage of this brand being a Canadian brand, and we rented some Canadian Mountie uniforms, and our bit of marketing was, in those days as well, you didn't have pre-packed sandwiches, so you had to queue for 20 minutes or so whilst they made the sandwich for you. And obviously, if you're in the city or in the West End, there's a queue of people out the door and into the street. So it was fantastic. We had a captive audience. So dressed as Canadian Mounties, we would have cold samples of our lovely flavoured mineral water, and we'd do a bit of fun and take the piss out of ourselves, but people loved the product. The taste actually really cut through. And I think, again, coming back to conversations like with Jemima earlier on, it's about the brand and does the product actually deliver? Mm-hmm. So we were able to build this distribution, support it with our crazy stunts dressed as Canadian Mounties, and eventually over a period of the sort of summer, that first summer that we were here, we probably got up to about 100 stockists, I guess, in central London.
Nice.
The key thing, and again, it was more by accident than design. It was more about saving cost. We actually went from one store to the next, and we built this billboard effect. So actually, and going back to the point you made, our brand looked much, much bigger than it really was. We were 3 Aussie guys, with a transit van and a lock-up warehouse in Notting Hill. But if you went into Soho or you went into the city, you could go from one sandwich bar to the next and you would see our 5 beautiful blue bottles with our lovely flavours on the top shelf of fridges.
Nice.
And so over that time, we were able to then start to get this awareness, and eventually we got a call from Sainsbury's after we had sort of completely dominated all the retail shops around the Sainsbury's buying office. Got a call from Sainsbury's in the November to say, we're doing a range review. We've just spotted your product. We think it's really interesting. Would you like to come and pitch it to us? And we got ourselves a listing in Sainsbury's off the back of that. Nice. We borrowed a couple of suits and went and had the meeting with their buying team. But I sort of use that as an illustration because, as I say, it comes back to the product delivering and it comes back to the distribution. And we quickly learned during that process. We were hearing earlier on about, do you learn marketing formally? Do you learn marketing through experience? You learn it through mistakes. You instinctively realise what works and what doesn't. And I think we're also, unknown to us as well, there's an element of authenticity that we were trying to bring to that as well. So I'll kind of quickly rattle through. So I from that, sadly, we sort of, and I'll come to the fuck up bit in a moment or later. But that brand went to another brand, which was Snapple, which you mentioned earlier on. So out of the demise of Clearly Canadian came Snapple. And again, not many people in the room probably know Snapple. Hands up if anybody knows Snapple. So that's interesting. Okay, so massive brand in New York. Certainly it was in the early 90s. And I found myself in New York. I was asked to go over there to look at this brand on behalf of somebody here in London, here in the UK in London, who'd been approached to import it. And he was a beer guy, didn't really have any soft drink experience. His team didn't. So I went over there to have a look at it, spent a couple of weeks in New York and Boston, and came back having done a deal with the owners to bring this brand into the UK. And it was at the time, it was the first iced tea product in the UK. So it was, Fran last month was talking about iced tea. We were the first iced tea in the UK back in 1993. It was a range of bottles that were bigger than anything else on the market here as well. So we were pushing a price barrier further up. And what we did was we replicated what we had done with no budget, with some budget. Yeah. We created the soft drink division within a fairly sizable London drinks importer. And we had a fleet of little white vans with Snapple written on the side, and we went up and down the streets and we sold the product in. And I built this little team of sales guys who would come in the morning, 7 o'clock, load up, go up and down the street. And we mirrored the American model of again, creating that billboard effect. And our distribution in London after a couple of years was equivalent in a sort of a per capita basis to what they had in New York. And off the back of that, the guys in America invested in a TV campaign. And we had a lot of fun with that, working with retailers and featuring retailers. Yeah. Anyway, the learning from that certainly was about, again, the authenticity of the brand, making sure that it was really available, but supporting it as well and making sure that the consumer understood the product and were able to get it into their hands. Fast forward on, because Quaker then bought Snapple, things changed, and you move on. Yeah. You move from one brand to another. I had a period of time importing mineral water and supplying the big warehouse parties. Mid-90s was great, if anybody remembers the rave scene. That was a fantastic time. Not a lot of people were drinking beer in these warehouse parties, but they were drinking a lot of water for some reason. And
no idea why.
Fortunately, they were drinking a lot of my water, which was even better. But on one hand, we were doing that, but on the other hand, we also had listing in Boots, and we did a co-label deal with Marks and Spencer's. So actually, we were kind of straddling both ends of the spectrum there. And we went from nothing to, I think in 24 months, we were doing about 2 or 3 million bottles a year. So we went from very much, accelerated very, very quickly, but we were taking business away from Volvic, and the owners of Volvic then bought that brand, and they decided to cut the UK market out completely. I ended up having to make myself and my team redundant after a couple of years, having made a massive impact into the market. It kind of happened. We were It's fortunate, we were the first sports cap bottle of mineral water in the UK. So, we kind of, the packaging really helped in that kind of environment as well. So, it comes back to, again, the brand has to deliver in terms of taste, or it has to deliver in terms of the packaging or the usage occasion, and we were kind of riding that crest at that moment in time. But the opportunity that came from the kind of ashes of that brand was getting involved with the launch of Red Bull in the UK. And that was quite a phenomenon.
I can imagine.
If anybody understands the story about Red Bull, it's quite a story. I think there's some urban myths about Red Bull as well. I can tell you that the reality is that it took a long time to get Red Bull established. Yeah. It took several years for them to go from Austria to the other German-speaking countries and then to the UK. But in the late 90s, we launched Red Bull in the UK, and it was a mistake, but it was also part of the initial success. Part of the initial success in terms of volume was that the first distributor sales agency that took on Red Bull was very, very strong in the beer sector, in the bars and the nightclubs. Yeah. And so very quickly, Red Bull got established into the on-trade, student venues. It became a mixer with vodka, which was a bit of a kind of a link to what was happening in Austria as well. Yeah. But of course, that became a real rod for our back. And part of my role joining the brand was actually to reposition it from being this mixer with vodka. Yeah. How do we get this thing into daytime? How do we get people to understand that it actually delivers energy and stimulation rather than just being a mixer? Yeah. So that was a massive job, and that was the job that we undertook in the early 2000s with the student marketing campaign, the whole work that we did in driving, and we worked with the Top Gear guys to position the brand. You would have seen it probably quite subtly in some of the Top Gear episodes. Yep. We did a lot with Loughborough University with the sleep study around sleepy drivers and how you position this product to keep people awake when they're driving. Drive for 2 hours, stop, rest for 20 minutes, can of Red Bull, back on the road again after that.
Not that we're saying that anybody should do that.
But that was the research. And we literally went from, and again, it comes back again to kind of like a central theme here about the product, the brand having to deliver, but also having distribution, making it relevant to the consumer at the point of need. We could not get distribution in forecourts. They were telling us no. This was in 2000. Now, here today in 2026, thinking that you could never get Red Bull in a petrol station, that would seem really crazy because it's everywhere at a petrol station. But we could not get a listing. So we had to prove that this product would deliver. And then we invested massively in literally buying up that retail space. And we timed it to coincide with a campaign the government was running around sleepy drivers and advice on don't drive for too long and make sure you rest, etc. And we went from no distribution. 12 months later, we were out selling Coca-Cola in value terms. 12 months after that, in unit terms. Yeah. So it was about understanding, well, what's the consumer need? How do we get this product in front of the consumer? How do you get the trade to actually take you seriously? To take this brand on as well.
I mean, that's a pretty cool early journey. I mean, all of those brands had a niche as well, which is quite interesting because obviously Dan mentioned that earlier, like having that niche, like Canadian Water's Canadian, you had the Mountain niche going on with it. The sports cap bottle made it very niche. Red Bull had its niche. Red Bull's then grown from being a drinks company to actually being a sports brand that happens to have a drink side on to it. Yeah. A weird turnaround. But obviously now you're in e-com. So what do you think the biggest problems or challenges are in e-com at the minute?
Look, I think it's very interesting because you have people who are digital natives who have got a fantastic brand and they've got a great idea. They have a good understanding of who their audience is, but a lot of the time they rely upon just one channel of distribution. So the idea is that I build myself a Shopify store, spend lots of money with Meta, drive traffic to my website, and in doing so, I'm going to sell lots of product. It was great to hear your story about doing events. You're a digital native, you've created a brand within that digital native space, but actually you've embraced the fact that you've got to go out there and open up these other channels of distribution. And we were talking earlier on about, if you get out there and you're face to face with your customer, you get that feedback, and you can adapt the product, you can adapt the brand, and you learn so much when you do that. So I think there's what I see within e-commerce is that, yes, there are some brands that are initially very successful. Yeah. They get to a certain level. To get to that next level, you've got to be spending so much more money to do that. And what's the return on investment starting to look like there? So I would always say, and I have these conversations with brands, you've got to also be thinking about B2B. Yeah. Now, you may not feel at a certain stage that you then want to be doing deals with John Lewis and your Debenhams of this world and physical stores, but you really should also be considering about placing your brand where the consumer for your product is already shopping. Yeah. So yes, by all means, get traffic coming to your website. You can build your brand through your website. You can have all that brand story. And again, so much today is all around the founder story. It's about authenticity. But actually, if you can then utilize technology like we have created with Alvio and put your brand into lots of other places with a really good collaboration, a really good partnership where you know what that demographic looks like. Yeah. It's not going to be putting it somewhere where it's just going to sit and not do anything. A really, really good collaboration should have fertile territory for that brand to succeed. So I think there's certainly it's about opening up to other strategies to grow your business is one of the pieces of advice that I would always give.
I like that, and yeah, one of the running themes we've had throughout DC is always like when a lot of the brands that speak, where's always there, because I don't normally do the brand interviews. The one thing that always comes out is it's not just a single channel, and not just marketing channels as in TikTok or pay-per-click or any of that shit. It's the channels that go on behind the scenes. Like so many brands have talked about their pop-up stores or their collaborations with other brands that have a similar market. And yeah, it's quite interesting to see that some of these big brands that don't do it, but probably a side point, but it's interesting to see the big brands at the minute that haven't done that are the ones that are now trying to do it and fucking up. Yeah, we've got these challenger brands that are starting up that are doing it from out the gate. So yeah, that's just my personal dig at Rafa because they fucked up and they're backtracking now to try and do it and it's failing miserably. But
yeah, and I think also people they like to sort of chase clicks.
Yes.
For thinking that thinking that lots of engagement, digital engagement, means that you're going to be very, very successful.
Be nice, wouldn't it?
It would be. It'd be fantastic. But I always say it comes back to the authenticity piece as well. So, lots of clicks because you've done something kind of crazy or whatever and gets you a bit of attention doesn't necessarily translate into sales. Yeah.
So just conscious of time, like I could interview you forever because I know so much more of your story and like, yeah, there's some brilliant ones in there. But just so I've got time for questions because I know there will be some. You've had a brilliant career. What's been that, and you alluded earlier, what's been that biggest fuck up for you? Yeah,
I mean, look, you don't get to my age without making a lot of mistakes. So if my wife was sat here right now, she would probably give you lots of answers. So clearly Canadian was a very interesting one. That was the very first brand that brought me to the UK originally. Yeah. Now we were a complete startup. I was 21 years of age. My two old schoolmates from Australia, who I started it with, were also the same age as me. We had no real experience. We had no contract with the brand in Canada. They were a relatively new startup brand as well, but they had a massive growth in Canada and had done incredibly well. When they first tried to break into the UK market, they tried to list with a couple of the big distributors here who were just not interested. Mm-hmm. And we were kind of their kind of last throw of the dice. Yeah. We were unproven. We had lots of energy, and we made it happen. But we had no contract with these guys. Once we'd started to, after a couple of years, make real inroads, and we had distribution, we were in supermarkets, etc. The big guys went knocking over in Canada and said, "Listen, guys, we can get you across Europe, but you've got to get rid of these guys. These young Aussie guys in London, got to get rid of them. We need the UK market if we're going to take you into Europe as well." And so what happened was we literally had no contract, so we didn't protect ourselves. We were incredibly vulnerable. And of course, what started to happen was they started shipping a short-dated product, which then forced us out of the supermarket, so we were delisted. Yeah. They then had product ready to send to the supermarkets. So we had to do a little bit of ducking and diving for a period of time to try and keep the cash coming in. And we managed to sell the stock that we had through the independent channels. So that was obviously a massive mistake. I think the other personal mistake of mine was I left Red Bull after a fantastic period of time, but you've also got to know when to move on. And kind of the core crew of us that were part of the early phase left all around the same time. But I left 6 months, I think, before the economic crash in 2008, because I wanted to get back into startup world. I wanted to get back into working with small brands, independent brands. I was missing that energy. We'd kind of got a bit into the bureaucracy at Red Bull at that point. So I left this massive brand that was relatively safe and went out into the startup world again. And 6 months later, economic crisis, and all the funding dried up for all these brands that I was helping. There was probably a period of about 3 years or so that was pretty tough. You learn a lot from that. You learn about resilience. But you bounce back, and the next chapter starts after that. So, but hey, that's only 2013. So I'm not going to kind of go down that route because you don't have the time.
Well, let's get one question, because obviously you're going to be on the panel in a second as well to help out. So we'll keep it to one question, and then we can have all the questions after your panel, can't we? So, already hand up from Paul. Go on, buddy.
What's been your favourite brand that you've worked with, and what's been the craziest stunt that you've done?
Oh,
that's 2 questions.
Blimey.
That's cheeky.
Look, I'd be a liar if I didn't say Red Bull was absolutely the favourite. Justina knows I'm a massive, passionate motorsports fan, so I was living a passion. Now, I wasn't involved with the motorsports team. I was very much the drink, but I had access to all of that, and I was able to give other people access. I think that's what I really loved, was knowing that I could give access to people like me who were passionate about motorsports and all the other sports. I'm a big mountain sports fan as well. So that was fantastic. The craziest stunt, because we were doing stunts, in the very early days with Clearly Canadian. The craziest thing at the age of 21 was dressed as a Canadian Mountie, dancing on a podium at Heaven, which is the largest gay nightclub in London. That was pretty crazy.
Brilliant. I'm never not going to unsee that.
We had to do that to get the listing in the bars. That was the condition on getting the listing in the bars.
Is that why you have to grow wings to get out of there? So you take the line Red Bull.
Oh, mate.
Wings.
Absolutely.
I'm just looking forward to our summer party, because I know there's a poll in there. Like, everyone, that's a brilliant interview. Thank you for the last minute. Give them a round of applause, please.
Thank you.